And we're live. Welcome back to the After Action Project. This is episode 110. Tonight we are joined by Brent Hickmon. There it is. I
You
told you.
did
it. Not even the last name.
Nope. Brent, it's the easiest names that I mess up. It's that. How do you mess up Brent? All right.
That's perfect.
Oh my gosh. All right, here we go. Take two. Welcome back to the After Action Project. This is episode 110. Tonight we are joined by Brent Hickmon of Defenders USA, and we'll be discussing their Decisional Defender Course. Tonight's episode, just like most of our episodes, all of our episodes, is brought to you by Locked In Grip and the Range Buddy app, as well as the Firearms Radio Network. Have you ever lost that perfect grip after shooting a few rounds, or had your sweaty grip diminish the ability to hang onto your firearm in different weather conditions? Specifically, the 110 degree desert heat out here. Locked In Grip is a grip enhancer that keeps your hands free of moisture to create a slip-free connection to the action of shooting your firearm. Locked In Grip liquid shooting sports chalk is made for shooters by shooters. Visit lockedingrip.com to purchase your liquid shooting sports chalk now. That's lockedingrip.com. Our other show sponsor is the Range Buddy app. It's a collection of over 160 handgun shooting drills, all sorted by the required target type, filterable by the skills that you want to work on. There's a virtual instructor component in there that'll give you random commands based on your targets or the target that you're using. You can integrate move commands in there, so it'll call out a random move command, and then use your phone's accelerometer or a predetermined movement time before calling out additional random commands for you. There's that and a whole bunch more. There's a Range Buddy instructor marketplace where you can find reputable instructors to train with either in person or online, virtually. There's a dry fire tool and tracker in there with a shooter's metronome that if you're wanting to work on, your 0.2 split times, you can set it by the split time instead of having to figure out the beats per minute. And so much more. It's available on Android and iOS. Check that out at rangebuddy.app or in your favorite app store. I guess it could be your least favorite app store if you have the other one, right? If your favorite is iOS and you have an Apple, whatever. Just check it out. That's Range Buddy app, available on iOS and Android. If you like what we're doing and would like to help support the show, visit patreon.com/afteractionproject. And as always, a 5-star review wherever you're listening to us would be greatly appreciated. Andy, we were out there on the range today this weekend with quite a few students. So talk to us a little bit about your experience with Locked In Grip as an instructor this past weekend.
Locked In Grip kind of stole the show this weekend on the range. I think it was really hot this weekend for New Mexico. I think we're pushing 100 degrees probably at some point, and everybody's out there lathering on the sunblock, spraying it all over. And one lady was like, "Man, I have this sunblock all over my hands." And I was like, "Oh, this isn't going to be good." She was a new shooter. And I went and grabbed my little tube of Locked In Grip. And I said, "I'm going to give you the magic. Are you ready?" And she's like, "I think so." So then I said, "Hold out your hand." So I gave her a little bit of dab of the Locked In, had her rub it in. And I said, "All right, feel your hands now." And she's like, "Oh, wow, that's a big difference." So as soon as I did that, we were pushing 20-something students on the range. And the next person was like, hey, can I try some? Sure. Hey, can I try some? Sure. So next thing you know, at least half the line now has Locked In Grip on their hands, and everybody came up after and, "Hey, what is that? Where'd you get that at?" And so just a little brief explanation of a good benefit for it. As we've mentioned before, especially with newer students, we want to kind of eliminate some things as far as like nervousness, sweating, sunblock, oil on your hands, all those things that necessarily isn't what you're going to have typically even at the Walmart parking lot when bad things happen. So I can tell you that it really stole the show this weekend, and I'm hoping that they got a couple sales out of it here out of Albuquerque.
Yeah, it definitely was a benefit on the range. I had a couple, just like you said, some new shooters where they were nervous, sweaty, all that good stuff. So broke it out. That's like the one thing I can always find because of the nice little carabiner clip. Just hook it on the handle of my range bag. Everything else is a mess. I'll be out there in the range pulling everything out. Staplers, empty ammo boxes, freaking sunscreen, empty sunscreen. Just, Andy, do you have a marker? I can't find my marker, but without fail, I know exactly where the Locked In Grip. That's enough about the Locked In Grip. Let's talk about what you all are here for, and that's the Decisional Defender Course. brought to you by Brent. Brent, introduce yourself to our listeners. Talk to us a little bit about your background in the firearms training industry and the foundation for this course.
Okay. First, I'll just say thanks for having me. Just happy to be here. And Dave, thanks for committing to kind of get on here with me too. So my name's Brent. I'm an instructor for Defenders USA. I'm the lead instructor for the Western Slope area, which is Grand Junction, Glenwood Springs, pretty much anywhere west of the Continental Divide. But I operate mainly out of Cameo at Shooting and Education Complex. I've been shooting for about 12, 13 years now, training mostly under the owner of Defenders USA. His name's Adam Winch. That's kind of where I started my formal training. And I got into training because roughly 13, 14 years ago, they found a dismembered body half a mile from my home in an apple orchard. So I said, okay. And I was a new husband and father to be. So at that point I was like, okay, that was a little close to home. And I live in like a block of maybe 32 homes, I think it is. And so it was awfully close. So that was the kind of catalyst for getting into firearms. And roughly only 3.5 years ago, after training with Adam a lot, he's like, hey man, I'm moving to Arizona to kind of change some life stuff, and do you want to take over, like start learning how to teach and take over and run some stuff here for me, kind of take my place? And I was like, what did you say? That's kind of humbling, because like he was pretty much the only instructorship that I had encountered, right? And he's law enforcement, military background. I'm a 100% civilian background. So a lot of my stuff comes from how I think civilians might interact with people and be in a defensive encounter, right? So 3.5 years ago, I got my NRA certifications. And then after that, I think I went to Brian Hill with the Complete Combatant to get his Decisional Defender, Deliberate Coaching certification, and then got my Range Master, both basic and advanced, and that's where I think I met Andy. I don't remember if it was advanced or basic, and then basic. It was basic.
Yeah.
So after that, I got involved, just took a break for a little bit, and then went to train with Active Self-Protection for their instructor certification program that they offer, which I was in cohort 6 with Adam Winch as well. So he decided to retake it because he was actually in the first cohort. So he got to experience the first iteration and then the later one. So, which was good for me to kind of be taking that course, because it's a 6-month-long program and weekly meets, reading. I don't know if any of you two have taken it, but it's pretty intense. It's like, I think it's 3 college credit hours or more worth of adult learning theory. And then most recently, this weekend, I trained with Tim Herron in his performance pistol class, or I can't remember exactly what it's called, but 2-day performance class, so which was awesome. Then that's kind of my background. It's recent, but there's a lot, in my opinion, and it was kind of a crash course as far as instructorship, because I wanted to get as much outside instructor teaching than your basic NRA stuff. So and last year I just wanted to kind of take a break, because it was just like this class. And so I started to take a break and try to implement what I learned into my classes as far as how I teach stuff and all that. So but 100% civilian based. So I don't have any military or law enforcement background. For whatever reason, my path in life before that didn't guide me down that way. So that's that.
Nice. That's awesome to see you go after those additional instructor credentials and training. And that's a heck of a lineage, right? Because the vast majority of instructors, they stop at that NRA certificate. And then, a good percentage goes through the range master stuff, but the ASP, right, the active self-protection, their instructor course, Tim Herron's class, I don't know if you know, he has an instructor course that is, I think Andy took that down in southern New Mexico a couple years ago. Is that correct?
Yeah, and taking it again in November.
I would be there, but that's my son's birthday. So,
dang kids.
He offers it once or twice a year. I think.
I talked to him about it this weekend. So I'm gonna figure out another day for that, another time.
Nice.
Because that's definitely on the list. Because I watched him run that class this weekend, and I was kind of inspired and pretty much in awe. Right? I'm like, that's what I aspire to be. That just run everything so efficiently. I mean, yeah, he likes to talk, right? And he knows it, but the class ended pretty much on time every time, and I believe everybody got way more than they thought they would. So definitely taking that next if I can.
Yeah, usually Tim is really good at talking, and sometimes to his detriment, I think, in the beginning in some courses where people are like, oh, okay, Tim. But the reality is that people got to look at it in a different light. Tim is trying to give you everything he has in his mind in 2 days. And his brain doesn't stop until he feels like he's giving you everything he can give you. So, some people may look at it in a negative light, and I soak it all up because not many instructors take that kind of time and just want to spend all their time the whole weekend with their students. I've had some where 5 o'clock up, time to go. See ya. So, I'm with you there. But real quick, this is a class about Brent, not Tim. And I can tell you I've shot with Brent twice now at Range Master, and then actually, ironically, out here in New Mexico at Tim's range. And, solid vouch for Brent. Brent's an awesome shooter, really good dude, great family. So highly, highly excited to bring you on the show tonight.
Hey, thanks for inviting me too. Wouldn't be here without you and going to that class before. So appreciate it.
David, let's kick it over to you. Talk to us a little bit about your background in firearms and how you got linked up with Brent and into this Decisional Defender course.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the invite. Yeah, I've been training with Defenders for probably 10 years now. Took the first few classes with Adam, and I second everything Brent says. He's a fantastic instructor. And then actually met Brent at one of the classes where I think, Brent, you were in the class. So
yeah, probably.
We were both students at the same time, but it's been a lot of fun. I grew up in South Dakota, grew up hunting, and I've always been way familiar with rifles, know my way around them. My day job's an engineer, but I spent 12 years in the Army and Army Reserve, one deployment to Afghanistan. So a lot of time behind a rifle, and pistols were always, they were around, but it was like a foreign object. So when I started training more with handguns, I really enjoyed it, and it was something that I was bad at. So wanted to, get progressively better, and I just really enjoy shooting. So I try to get at least a couple Defenders classes under my belt every year. And, Brent is a fantastic instructor. I've seen him, progress kind of from day one, and it just gets better and better. And I do a little teaching. I do some adjunct teaching, and I always enjoyed training in the Army too. There's a lot of hip pocket stuff that goes on that people don't talk about, but there's a lot of teaching that goes on just off the cuff when you're wearing a green suit. And I really enjoyed that. But I just enjoy shooting. I don't, I'm not in the competitive stuff now. I just really enjoy getting better. And then these classes enable a person to have a bunch of drills and skills that they can do on their own. They're not as fun as the class, but they still arm you with the ability to kind of train yourself and even your family. I'm an empty nester now, but all three of my kids are left-handed but right eye dominant. So that was a challenge, teaching them all to shoot. I thankfully taught them all to shoot rifles right-handed, so that's a little bit easier, but handguns was kind of up in the air. I'm just like, if you can hit the target, great, just keep doing that. So it's been a challenge, but I just can't speak highly enough of Defenders. And I'm a huge safety nerd too. I've been around a few NDs. I was thinking today, I know 3 different people that have been shot accidentally, either by themselves or somebody else. And that's always impressed me about Brent and Adam and the whole Defenders operation, is they take safety very, very seriously at the range. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a huge skill in and of itself for an instructor. And I don't think it really gets discussed much. At least I haven't heard the discussions going on in a public forum. And, I've told a story, before on the podcast about how, in my beginning years as an instructor, I had a local business come out, and they were kind of observing, doing a kind of an impromptu interview to see how I was doing on the range, how I ran the range. And it was not a performance that I was proud of. It's probably the worst range that I've ever ran up to that point and since. And it really forced me to take a look back and say, hey, how do we get as close to zero as possible with the likelihood of having an injury out here on the range? And we've got some great safety measures in place, and it's an art form almost when we're taking these classes. And Brent was talking about how he's just efficient and how he runs his range, and it's something to be admired. So that's awesome to hear you speak of how the safety piece of it, because that's typically not some insight that we get into. And I want to take a second to kind of go into that a little bit further with Brent and give Brent an opportunity to talk to us about your mindset as an instructor around that safety piece and what you do to ensure that your students are safe on the range with a bunch of strangers.
So for me, I spend pretty much 15, 20 minutes at the beginning of class doing our safety brief, probably a little bit longer. I have kind of created my own 3 firearm safety rules that are a little bit different, but for me, I think that they kind of translate well to pretty much any time you're going to use the gun, in dry fire, storage, all kinds of stuff. And some of it comes from John Curria's safety rules, but I teach that, I call them the deliberate trio. So I give the definition of deliberate, which is to do something intentionally and on purpose, right? So there's 2 things there that kind of layer. And then so deliberately touch the trigger, deliberately point the muzzle in direction of least consequence, and deliberately condition the gun basically for its current intended purpose. So those are kind of my 3, and I go into a little bit of depth per each one, right? And then to kind of round it off, Adam and I both sum it up with, if you're not willing to bury it or buy it, don't point guns at it, right? So there's the three rules that I kind of made up, and then the overall, don't shoot stuff you don't want to bury or buy, right? And so I instill that at the beginning, and then we go over a very safe holster process. If you've ever trained with us, it's kind of a funny way to say it, but our 3 safety rules for holstering, because that's usually the most, usually the time that we're going to end up having a problem, right? Accidentally shooting ourselves, is because we go to holster the gun and we're just hunting away. So that's where bad things happen most of the time. So there are 3 are, touch yourself, get sexy, meaning kick your hip out of the way, and slowly look it away. So, and I started adding into the fact that I see a lot of people when they go to holster, they get it right there, and then just jam it in. And it's like, no, don't do that. Like, you're not done. So I started implementing a little thought process of pretend this gun is your baby. And you don't drop the baby in the crib because it's going to wake it up, right? So you slowly put the baby in the crib when you're holstering the gun, right? So that's kind of how I try to conceptualize a safe holstering. Usually it works, but, I keep an eye on people. I'm running that line up and down, and usually there's at least a few people that forget, they don't kick their hip out enough or, just go hunting away. That's the one that drives me crazy the most. I don't care necessarily if you're like kicking your hip out and doing the thing, but when you go to just slam it home and hunt for the hole, it's not good. They're pointing the gun at themselves the whole time, and I gotta start yelling at people. We don't really yell at people at Defenders, but we will if we had to.
I don't know if you've seen it, but we're gonna send you the Secret Service lady that was helping.
Oh, somebody
Trump.
sent that to me already.
I was going to say the
Same
Secret
thing.
Service. Yeah, the Secret Service doesn't think you need to practice or train on reholstering your gun, and it worked out just fine.
Yeah, and then if I have a big class, I'll actually, and I'm the only one, like some of the other guys local to me, sometimes they're full-time guys working for a mechanic and some other stuff. So I don't always have an AI. But if I have a big class of more than 8, if I have 8, I'll run relays to help as another safety layer. And I kind of learned that from Tom Gibbons, but I specifically use the relays, even though they're students, to one, add a safety layer, and secondary, let the back relay actually not help coach, but if you see it from a second point of view, you might be doing something that I've been like, hey, you should fix this gap between your support hand and your firing hand. Seal the gap a little better. But if I have a third person, if the person on the relay is doing that, it's in the back, and I say to the person in the front, then they visually can go, oh, that's what he means. Okay, now I can secondarily input that into my own shooting. And it tends to help out as far as getting people up to speed with corrections a lot faster when they see it happening to somebody else. Because then you're not like pointing it, you're not picking on them, because a lot of people have emotions when they're involved in the shooting, and they think everything's about them when it's really not. It's just a safety thing or a technique that you should try to fix. And if I just point it out on somebody else, then I'm not like picking on them. So it seems to work really well. But as far as the safety, I just keep an eye on it. I run up and down. I do a lot of walking. So I just try and keep everybody as safe as possible. And if there's like problem students, we tend to, really hasn't been in my experience, but if there's guys who are stuck with they want to stick to their, strong side or 4 o'clock carry, I put them on the end of a line and manage that so that they're holstering and doing their thing into this berm as far away from everybody else as possible. Just so nobody else is freaking out that somebody's maybe pointing a gun at them for their holstering process. So that's kind of how I try to layer stuff as far as safety.
That makes sense, and that's a good response. I appreciate that. David, talk to us a little bit about the gear that you ran during this course. What gun were you running? How much ammo did you bring? And magazines, all that good stuff.
I generally run my M&P. I'm a Smith & Wesson nerd, but I've got a couple M&Ps. I've got an M&P 2.0 compact that I pretty much is my everyday carry. And I run a Leupold red dot on top. And oh my gosh, how many rounds I went through. I kind of go a little crazy when it's one of the mag dump drills because it's fun, right? That's why we're there. So I probably went through over 600 rounds, maybe pushing 800. I can't even remember, but I don't think all the students did that. I enjoy shooting. There's something in my lizard brain that, enjoys the process. But yeah, I generally carry one of Brent's appendix carry holsters, and I'm not a small guy, so it's not quite 12 o'clock. It's usually canted a little bit over, about 1 o'clock on me. And I find that to be the most comfortable, most effective. And I've gotten faster, certainly not as fast as Brent and these guys, but I keep at it. My struggle has always been accuracy versus speed. That's usually what Brent's harping on me. And it's, from 50 years of hunting where, just to work on the speed rather than being super anal retentive about, aim small, miss small, all that stuff.
Not aim small, miss small. That's good. You just don't have to shoot them all in the same hole.
He knows the importance of shot placement, especially when it comes to hunting. And it's
exactly
tough to push yourself out of that. So
it's tough.
It is. It really is. Hey, Brent, is this a 1 day or 2 day course? I don't know if we covered that.
It is optional 1 or 2, but you have to take day 1 because I layer all the curriculum. So if you want to take day 2, you have to take day 1. But it's set up so you can kind of get a taste, and then if you want to sign up later when you're done, go ahead and sign up and come the next day. But it is geared to get the most benefit for a full 2 days. So
nice. David mentioned he runs one of your holsters. Do you make holsters too, or is that just kind of a private thing?
Yes. My full-time job is running Haven Defense Company, which is a little holster company that I operate with my family. So
very cool.
There's that. Thanks for mentioning that. But
So the course is Decisional Defender Course. Talk to us a little bit, Brent, about the overall course objective and what you want your students to come away from after completing the course.
Yeah. So I took some I've taken a lot of training in the last 3 years, and I took some inspirations from the book Building Shooters from I think it's Dustin Solomon. So that's a really good book, but it's more law enforcement based as far as a lot of the stuff in it. And for me, I tried to create the curriculum to be more about not so much just all timers, but a lot of visual processing, visual signals, and the fact that not every threat may or may not be a lethal use of force threat. So some of it I use part of the first, after the first day, towards the end, I de-gun everybody and we do a little bit of palm pepper spray work. But with the inert trainers from Palm, I reached out to them and they hooked me up with some colored ones that kind of match Defender's colors, and which like blue and gray. So we do a little bit of training on that at the end of day 1, once I downloaded everybody, just to make sure they don't have guns or bullets on them. And but day 2, I mix it up so that you may or may not have a lethal threat, but you might have a threat that you need non-lethal options for. So, but I wanted to try and implement that while people have their gun on, because even if it doesn't seem like a lethal threat at the time, maybe you go to deploy your non-lethal option and then suddenly it becomes a lethal threat. So I tried to create a little bit of drills that try to implement that as far as real life situations that could happen to people. So, but it's not too crazy as far as like you're going to run around here and do all this crazy work it's not out of the context of what would probably happen in real life. It's not tactical band camp stuff. So, and what else? Were we?
No, that was it. The objective of the course and
Yep.
How it's structured.
So,
that's awesome.
And part of the objective of the course is mindset too. So Defenders is big on building the mindset of people, because sometimes people strap a gun on and think they're good to go. So a lot of the decision-making process is about whether or not as long as total brain relapse here. When, man, where was I going with that? Mindset. So
Mindset.
yeah. So if you get into a defensive encounter, like, you got to know whether or not it's time to go and whether or not you would interact. You got to be able to switch gears as far as it's time to go lethal, or it's okay to just spray this dude with pepper spray. But it's all, to me, it seems more about part of the curriculum is teaching people that it's okay to be a lethal option for people, because some people put a gun on and would never actually use it. So they got to get that in their mind, and that's part of what we try to do in Defenders USA and this specific class. So a lot of that is about, non-lethal versus lethal threat options.
That makes sense. One of the things that we explain to our students is, hey, I want you to be reluctant to go to the gun. I want there to be some reluctance, but at the same time, balance that with the understanding that if it's time to go to the gun, it's time to go to the gun, and you need to be able to perform.
Yeah, time to go right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's you got to be able to not necessarily flip the switch, but you need to understand that pulling a handgun on somebody is a very serious thing. Shooting somebody it's even more serious. However, there are some people that need to be shot in order to save your life or the life of a loved one, and being able to recognize that and having the skills and the abilities before that, specifically pepper spray. It's a great deterrent. I carry palm pepper spray on me, and dude, I'm too old to be getting into fights with people. I don't want to get beat up. You know what I mean? Like, you can look at somebody, right, and you see these dudes and you look at them and you're like, man, if you didn't know that dude was X, Y, or Z and jiu-jitsu or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
You might want to pick a fight with that dude, and he would fold you up and stuff you in a drawer. So you just don't know, right? You can't. So that pepper spray is a huge benefit for me, and it's reassuring because I understand that I have a tool that's not the gun, that's a little bit more than, hey buddy, leave me alone. It's, hey buddy, leave me alone, or I'm going to spray you with this hot sauce, as John Correa likes to call it. And it's worked wonders for dispersing homeless people out of my vicinity when I've hey, I don't want anything to do with you, and they've gotten aggressive. The other thing you were talking
really
about,
good. Oh, sorry. The other thing's really good too is, even if you were this beast MMA guy, right, and you're gonna you do want to get into an altercation and you're not afraid to do it, there's bloodborne illnesses out there. There's so many other things. Even if you were John Wick badass and you could beat somebody up, you're gonna have to deal with the aftermath of that too, when you get blood on your hands and all that too. So the pepper spray is just another. Yeah, it's just a great option. Just distance-based something that's non-lethal. I mean, it seems kind of common sense, but
yeah. And another thing, part of that curriculum that I tried to design was getting people to be less timid about using their voice. Part of a couple of the drills that I kind of came up with were, like, if it was a non-lethal threat option, use some sort of verbal commands, like raise your voice, yell at people. People don't like getting in other people getting in their face, right? So sometimes if you just yell at people, that can kind of deter them for a moment to be like, oh, okay, you're not the prey I thought you were. So I wanted to try and implement some of that practice, because people rarely practice yelling at people, and it's kind of awkward because we did it, and it is a little bit awkward out there when you're yelling at other people and you're like supposed to be friends, right? But part of this drill is you're yelling at me. Hold on, wait, this is kind of weird. But if you kind of break that, people are less inclined, I think, to be timid. There's a lot of people that are scared to be rude, and And if it's your potential life on the line, who cares? Be rude, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And the other interesting thing is, people will often joke about, hey, I can't chew gum and walk. It's incredible how many people cannot shoot a gun and talk at the same time. Right. And it's, so we've implemented some things, given verbal commands and then shoot. And it's, the wheels just start to fall off. And it's like, hey, you talk every day and you're a pretty good shooter, but you try to put those two simple things together and it just kind of falls apart. David, he was talking about decision-making in the class. Talk to us a little bit about your takeaway. What was your biggest takeaway from that class around that topic of, making the decision?
I was super jazzed when I found out about the class, because that's always struck me as kind of a difference that I learned in the Army. Our shooting training was always get online, shoot the target. Maybe it might pop up. That's the only dynamic interaction you'd have. And you go to war and shit's moving all over. You're in a car, they're moving, you're moving. You got to decide on your targets. It's crazy. So, fast forward to getting better behind a handgun and trying to train up to be competent enough to everyday carry. It's always struck me that, hey, your brain is your most powerful weapon. And you have to train in stressful environments and still hit the target and still make the right call. And that's hard to do. I mean, you have to do the crawl, walk, run and get good with the basic skills, but you have to be able to engage your brain, move, engage your mouth, all at the same time. And Brent's course really did that, and still in a safe environment. There was moving, there was, trying to decide what's a valid target, what's not a valid target. And that's harder than it sounds. On the surface, it sounds pretty easy. Just, looking at flashcards, shoot the target, that's one of the lower level skills, but it's hard to do. So I really appreciated that. And I've been, trying to do something. I get my way. I'll keep taking these classes because it's hard to do in the modern structured range environment. You can go out in the desert and, try and do it. But, to have it in a class in an instructor led situation, that's unique from what I've seen out there as far as class offerings. And like you said, we're not training to be John Wick. We just have to be able to say, hey, is that a valid target? Do I need to draw my pepper spray? Do I need to draw my gun? Do I need to drop my pepper spray and go to my gun? Do I need to drop something that's already in my right hand and go to my gun? Your brain, you can't shut your brain off during all this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that. And I like that, you mentioned flashcards in that course. I'm going to do a shameless plug for the Range Buddy app because that has something very similar built in. And I don't know if you've checked it out, but the virtual instructor component has you enable your commands. So, we use target commands. So there'll be different shapes, numbers. I'm sure you guys have seen it. Tom Givens uses it for the his casino drill.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a version in the app that you can print off at your printer on an 8.5 by 11. But one of the things you can add to it is you can add visual indicators. And I did that for two reasons. One, right, we have a student of ours that is deaf, and he's come out and trained with us before, and he's had to bring an interpreter out. So there are visual indicators that will show up if it's a 1 or a red on the screen so they can see that. Or you can enable no-shoot images, and it will randomly choose a shoot or a no-shoot image, flash it on the screen. If you want a half-second presentation, a quarter-second presentation, a 1-second presentation on that image, you can do that. So it'll force you to make that decision, and then you can reduce the amount of time that the image is going to be displayed for to kind of force your brain and your eyes at processing it a little bit faster. And it kind of came from that, right? It's not every up command shouldn't be a shoot command. And I don't know if I necessarily buy into the, if you only shoot doubles, you're always going to shoot doubles, or you'll shoot it. I don't know if I necessarily fall into that. I feel like the vast majority of people aren't firing enough rounds to really ingrain that sort of training scar.
I agree.
To where, but it is something that kind of, it forces you to do something other than, present your gun out, press the trigger. You have to get the brain involved. So that's available on the Range Buddy app if you don't have flashcards, or you want to make it completely random for you. So, Brent, I don't know if you had something that you wanted to talk about with that specifically.
So I might have to implement that into the class now. But so a lot of the time, the other part of that I do with the flashcards is sometimes I will mix them up and I'll just go in between each two students. So I'll flash up the card, and sometimes one side will have a threat indicator and the other side will have like a cell phone, but they're just black and white flashcard images. So you have to like quickly pay attention and shift your visual focus just enough to figure out what's going on, and then be able to switch your visual focus back to that specific spot that you want to hit on the target. And I didn't realize what I was doing until I trained with Tim, Riley, and AJ and Andy that few weeks ago. And I didn't really understand like that focal point focus will help your deviation be this big instead of this big. So I unintentionally was trying to build on that as far as visual focus switching. So, and I realized that after the class, I'm like, when I do those drills for those flashcards, you have to look and then you have to look back. So to me, it seems like it's actually helping ingrain visual shifting too, and being able to quickly look at something and then identify what that is and switch back quickly to what you got to shoot. So conceptually or contextually, if the guy's got a gun and he's bringing it up, like you have to switch down and identify that that's a gun and then switch back up and shoot where it needs to be shot. Because when I did some force on force in Montana, I played op 4 and I had a bruise on my low left leg because everybody saw the gun coming up and started shooting me before, they saw the gun and started shooting my leg instead of me, So I think that part of the visual switching is really good for a lot of people. And I didn't intentionally design it that way, but to me, it just is a good byproduct of me trying to, come up with a way for people to see visual indicators of some sort. And then I also mix in no shoots. So if you're going to town there, David, with shooting all your mag, I'll sneak up behind you with a white card that would signify it's no longer the bad guy's dead. Stop shooting him, because that could be a potential legal problem. So I just try and mix it up as far as that visual processing stuff.
That makes sense, right? Because we're talking about situational awareness. We're looking at people's hands and waistline, and that's typically not where you want to shoot them if you need to stop them.
Yeah.
So being able to shift that visual focus is a very great point. Hey, David, let's talk a little bit more about what was the student body makeup look like from your perspective as a student. What were your peers? Were they law enforcement dudes, civilians? What was the makeup of the student body?
Mostly civilians. All the classes I've taken kind of run together, but most of them are just average Joes, run the gamut. Some have white collar professional jobs. Some, don't. Some, are retired men, women. One of the rifle classes I took, there was a younger kid, young 20s that killed it. You could tell he trained a lot with his rifle, but he did awesome. So really anybody. And the first class I took was my wife and I, with Adam. So it's certainly welcoming to men, women, everything like that. And everybody, has certain strengths and everybody has certain weaknesses, but it's we're all used to hanging around shooters. It's a good group of people, very common sense based, hardworking. Listen, we pay to go to the class, so we try to get out of it as much as we can. Nobody's going to be jacking around, wasting other people's time. So I've never had a bad interaction with, this most recent class or any of the classes out there.
Thanks. We had a listener question come in. I want to get to it before we get too far away from when it was asked. C says, great stuff. Appreciate y'all. Are either of you belt specific while carrying? If so, what type of belts do you run? I forget the brand of mine, but I use it's a leather belt, but it's been stiffened. specifically for concealed carry. And in my day-to-day job, I wear a tucked-in polo. So I find that works well for me. I do have to replace it. I've had to replace it a couple times just because, like all things leather, it will kind of shift, right? Not shift, but it will kind of form to your body, and it loses that rigidity. But you know, I could treat it like a pair of work shoes or whatever every 6 months, having to replace it. But that's what I'm running. What about you guys? Let's start with Brent, and then we'll go to David.
I run well, it depends. Usually I run a leather belt that is actually made by Justin Thorson. And it's logoed with a Defender's logo. We were kind of playing around with whether or not we were going to sell them, I think. But I just run a leather belt that's moderately sturdy, but it's flexible also, because I normally carry inside waistband appendix. So if it's flexible, it gives me a lot more room or ability to conceal versus a super stiff belt. So if I want to get some torque on it, I can, but it still conforms to my body. So that's what I run. Unless I'm doing competition. This competition, I ran a double alpha, big fatty competition belt. So those are my two go-tos. But my wife runs a next belt. So a lot of good options out there.
Awesome. What about you, David?
I've got a couple different leather belts I generally run. I've got a Hanks belt that I got that I really like. It's just almost too stiff, so that just means I got to wear it more. And honestly, that's for when my Eddie Bauer belt falls apart. I've had this dumb thing for like 20 years, and it wears like iron. It's great. It's just the right amount of soft leather, and I've worn that to this last couple of class, but it holds that inside waistband holster just fine.
It's the Hanks belt. That's what I run as well. And I thought it was, but I was like, man, that doesn't sound right. What about you, Andy? What belt are you running specifically? That's a weird question. You're muted, buddy.
Oops. I thought I hit the button. So I'm still running a Blue Alpha belt. I run that one. I've been running it for years now. I've gone through a couple of them because after a while the Velcro kind of wears out. But the good thing is I get the hybrid. I think it's the hybrid inner, where it's Velcro inner and outer. I wear that at work all the time. Works great. Plus, I can go to a buffet, and if I need extra room, I can just loosen it a little bit, or tighten it if I don't have my gun. Things happen. And then for competition, I just got a Dominant Defense belt that actually will still work with the Blue Alpha inner, so it just kind of works out for me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I run a Blue Alpha belt when I'm at the, if I'm taking a class, I'll run the Blue Alpha belt with my dump pouch on there, first aid kit and all that good stuff, but I still run appendix. So getting back to the class, we talked a little bit about gear. Brent, I want to talk to you, and I want to get yours and David's opinion on where this course should fall in a student's continuum of training. Looking at the website and the course bio, there is a prerequisite skill level of you have to be able to consistently hit an 8-inch circle from 10 yards without a time requirement. So making sure that people can line their sights up 10 yards, put rounds on paper. Is it the next class after their concealed carry or their NRA basic firearms course? Where should, in your opinion, should it fall on their continuum of training, Brent?
As far as what we offer at Defenders, I'd say it would be just after. It kind of depends on your curriculum as far as what companies teach what, because some companies will teach a basic firearms class, but there's no holster drawing, right? For our fundamentals class, or what I would call perfecting the basics class, is what I kind of named my own class for that. I would say anywhere between a speed and accuracy type class to right after a fundamentals class. So it's kind of in the middle as far as skill level. As long as they're safe with the gun and can hit what they're trying to hit, it's all good. You should come to the class, because I try to teach to the students, not the exact curriculum. But this curriculum isn't designed specifically to make you a faster shooter or anything. It's all about decision making, right? So, and visual processing. So if you are draw the first shot of 3.5 seconds, but you still hit the target, you're still getting the rep of identifying what you need to identify and shooting what you need to shoot, or stopping shooting when you need to stop shooting. So as far as that, I would say as long as you're safe, intermediate shooters or even decently safe beginners can take the class. So
that's what I was going to ask David is, David, you have some experience shooting by what you've told us today and taking this course. What does Brent do really well in order to keep you engaged as someone who maybe is going maybe intermediate to advanced? What would you do? What does Brent do to keep you engaged?
Well, I'm always a science nerd at heart, and Brent really goes into the body mechanics and how your brain works and the brain-eye, hand connection, that sort of thing that I've, always found fascinating. And then, demonstration himself, but he doesn't spend too much time doing that. There's lots of time just coaching the students doing it, in the crawl, walk, run cycle. So and I've been lucky enough where the classes have been pretty small. I don't think I've been in one that's been more than 10. And it's just very engaging. And I get a lot out of watching other people too, seeing what they do well, what they don't do well, and then, trying to translate that into what I'm doing and then asking them to video me and all that sort of stuff. But, it doesn't get monotonous. If you're out there for a full day, some classes, they just get repetitive. Oh, let's do this again. It's always something different. You're always moving on to that next level. And that's, I think, what Brent does in a fantastic way. And then, going back to the question prior, I would agree it's probably not for your first class, but for me personally, it took probably at least a couple classes before I was comfortable carrying appendix, inside the waistband appendix and drawing from that to where I wasn't paranoid in my head about shooting myself. And it wasn't that I was doing anything wrong. It's just I've spent my whole life, where are you pointing the gun at? Don't point it at yourself. Getting past that to be at a point where I was getting more out of the training and not focused on, oh my God, I'm going to shoot myself in the groin. It just, for me personally, it took me a little while to get past that. And I suspect it's probably like that for a lot of people that are going, that yes, they've been around guns. Yes, they've shot, but carrying it right by something that's very important to you, that takes a little getting used to. And it's not the body mechanics of doing anything wrong. It's just getting out of my own head about being paranoid and thinking about that versus thinking about what I'm learning in the class.
That makes sense. It's very well said. We talked about that. We were in class, part of our safety check is we have students uncase their firearms, and oftentimes we'll have a couple students that are typically out there for a renewal or refresher course, and they have their concealed handgun on them. And we had 2 students coming out for the refresher course. They weren't previous students of ours, but so we go through that, have them unholster their firearm, and they check the magazine, loaded magazine, run the slide. They're not carrying with one in the chamber. So we talked about, overcoming that reluctance or that nervousness or that fear to carry with the round chambered. And what I found works well for a lot of folks is in dry fire. And I explained to them, hey, here's the thing. If you take the gun out of the holster, you press the trigger, you hear the click, right? Run the slide, reset it, reholster it. The next time you come out of the holster and you present on target, you should hear a click. And if you do that, and every time you hear the click after resetting the slide, that should reaffirm that you can safely do that process from presenting to reholstering without accidentally engaging that trigger. And as you're doing that, here are some things you look out for, because you're absolutely right. That can be a point of reluctance for a lot of folks. And if they want to carry appendix or at 4 o'clock even, they might say, oh, I'm just going to carry one without a chamber. And shout out to John Correa and the folks over at Active Self-Protection. The other thing I say is like, hey, you need to go on this guy's channel. And there are several videos of folks that did not feel comfortable carrying with a round in the chamber, and they died because of it. They were not able to chamber a round in time to save their life. I believe there was one of the more extreme ones. It was actually a gentleman and his brother or son, but there were 2 victims that he could have potentially saved, but he spent the last seconds of his life trying to chamber a round. And hey, it's your decision how you carry your gun. It's our job to make sure that that's a well-informed decision. And these are the potential consequences of not doing that. Here are some things that you can do to become comfortable doing that. And really, because all it is reassuring yourself that, hey, if I reholster my gun, I can do that without shooting myself in the privates, right?
Yeah.
And once you do that a bunch, you're still nervous, but you're less nervous and you feel comfortable, you feel confident and competent that you can do that without accidentally shooting yourself.
I
What
try
would you
to slow
say?
people down when we're holstering too.
Go ahead.
Like, hey, we're done shooting now. Disconnect, holster slowly. And that's going to apply in a real life situation too. Don't you put that gun away until you know you're safe. Once you know you're safe, calm down, put the holster away slowly, or put the gun away slowly.
And we talked to, we also talked to students about, hey, if it can go back into the holster, if the police are on the way, you can go back into the holster, you can do that safely. That's great. If you're so ramped up that you can't do that, it is perfectly fine to put that firearm on the ground, right? If that person is no longer a threat, that's when the gun goes back in the holster, when it's safe to do so, right? So the big thing is you don't want to have a gun in your hand when the cops show up looking for somebody that just shot somebody. But yeah, absolutely slow that process down. Be super deliberate with it, and figure that part out, right? Because the last thing you want is to be the shining example of the United States Secret Service not being able to reholster the firearm. Yeah. And if we look at this historically, right, like that is not going away. I feel terrible for her because I'm like, man, she is not going to be able to get past this. But it's a great example. And, we don't know the level of training that they had, but it wasn't enough in that moment. And that's what I think is the important part about it. When it matters the most. What's that?
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, so I was reading Greg Ellifritz's kind of comments about it, and he made a little bit of mention on her side that her waist on her pants were really high, and which makes that holster ride so high and provides difficulty. But she should have had the training in order to know that to be out on one of the most important details of her life, to be able to understand and practice for that. And I think that's where the failure comes in. Put her on a square range. She's probably a badass. Maybe I would assume, I've shot with a lot of women that are just amazing, badass shooters. But now you put it in a situation that, hey, someone just got shot, just so happens to be Donald Trump, and the wheels fell off. And I just feel like, that lack of training and that lack of knowledge and training just wasn't there. But anyway.
Yeah. We want to expand on that further too, right? We all, I'm sure it's a conversation that we've all had with people in our lives based on what we do. We don't know how we're going to react when our time is called, right? We can go out there and train, and you can be the best hand-to-hand dude with hand-to-hand. You can be the best shooter, right? There are people that are bested by lesser trained folks, right? There are good guys that train regularly and that are squared away dudes that have been shot and killed by somebody who has never trained a day in their life. The only shooting they do is the illegal shooting with their buddies or whatever the heck, and that was just their day, right? And we don't know how we're going to react under those circumstances. And we like to think that if you're in charge of one thing that I think we can end on this conversation on is that they were all willing, right, to put themselves in harm's way and put their bodies between Donald Trump and the shooter. but get the training and practice what the heck you're doing. And if you're wearing, that's a good point with the pant sizes, right? Dudes, I don't wear high-waisted pants. I don't wear low-waisted. You know what I mean? My pants ride at the same level every freaking day that I wear them, regardless of what pants or jeans or shorts or I'm wearing, if they're basketball shorts, if they're, you know what I mean? Females, right? That's a very valid point. Some days they're wearing low rise or mid rise or high rise or whatever the heck it is. So yeah, that's a very valid point. Make sure you train with your gun, how you carry it on a regular basis. Speaking of obstacles, Brent, what's one of the obstacles, kind of a common obstacle you see throughout the different iterations of this decisional course that students typically have that you need to work with them to kind of overcome?
As far as the obstacles to the students, I think some of it is like the biggest obstacle I ran or saw for the more advanced drill that we did, where I was mixing up whether or not it was a lethal threat option use or a non-lethal threat option use. 4 or 5 people at a time would get their palm pepper spray out, and if I switched it to suddenly it turns lethal, they would take a minute to like put the palm back in their pocket before they get their gun out. And that kind of goes to what John Correa talks about it too, and so does Brian Hill. Drop what's in this hand and get 2 hands on the gun. And I think it's just a mental thing. Whatever it is in their hands. They can't let it go. So I think that's one of the main hangups I saw for people during the classes. Usually it happens at least once or twice. But as far as the mental processing too, there's some of the drills that I tried not, like for Dave, I would challenge him a little harder than somebody that is moderately newer in the shooting. So I try not to create the drills so they're all the same for everybody, because the way I run it is like between 2 people, right? Usually I'll just go down the line, go up and down the line, and I'll try to group the more experienced shooters with each other and for that specific portion where I'm just going back and forth. And I try not to make stuff too difficult for those that I don't think are ready for it. So I try not to get that too involved for people who aren't ready. So if I can mitigate problems or dilemmas for people, I try to do it, because I don't want people leaving a class going, man, that drill was like too difficult for me. I couldn't accomplish the goal. And a lot of the times I'll start class with a little talk about your shooter performance, right? So if you're here to learn, right? Don't be too hard on yourself. And if you think you're failing in something, I don't even like to use the word fail, because one, you're already here learning, right? So you're already kind of winning, because you're a step ahead of the 80% of the people who don't own a gun, or just own a gun and don't do anything with it. So I try to instill a mindset of it's a learning environment and it's okay to not get it right the first time. So that kind of helps alleviate usually most of the issues of student hangups on most anything. So,
hey Brent, you mentioned you usually try to group the more experienced shooters together and then the newer shooters kind of together. So one thing, it's just a general question. So one thing I've learned just starting out jiu-jitsu, what they typically do is they put the purple belts with the white belts, the higher level guys with the lower level guys to help bring up that lower level guys. Have you considered trying to do that when like putting more experienced guy like David with maybe a new person to kind of help you along the way?
So that, yes, and I do it depending on the drills or the class. So if it's like a beginner class or where I'm not having to go through and change, like cater different visual drills. Like if it's not the Decisional Defender and it's a handgun performance or speed and accuracy type class, I will put relays of more experienced shooters and less experienced shooters, because then you can kind of get that secondary input from somebody who's more experienced. And then if they're on the back relay watching, and I teach you to do, the Judy chop thing from Scott Judlinski, and I think it's Mike Seeklander, right? As you get your support hand on, if a more experienced shooter has already got that dialed in, then they can see it happening more consistently and more often versus me just doing the demo one time or two times. So, yes.
Nice.
But for certain drills, I'll switch people up as far as advanced and intermediate, or, John Wicks.
Yeah, nice. Where can we find your website? How can we find you, Brent?
Real quick before we do that, I wanted to touch. You talked about dropping the pepper spray. Check out Retention Ring for our listeners, and then this might be something that you want to look at adding to your inert trainers. But what it'll allow you to do, you can slide it on there, right? But for me, it's I can loop that around, and then if it goes from this, you just flip it over the back of your hand, right? And you can still have it. That way, it kind of alleviates the. I don't want to drop it, but. So I wanted to get that in there before we got too far off of that. I know the lazy question. Is there anything we should have talked about before we get off here that we haven't covered?
No, I don't think so. As far as the course itself, I think overall it's just a really good course for mental processing with a gun on you. So, and I think that is not necessarily lacking, because as far as the available instructor stuff going on and classes offered for a lot of national level instructors that are totally awesome, I just haven't experienced anything like it myself. So I tried to come up with my own thing that was what I thought was kind of lacking in the firearms shooting world. And it seems like, Jeremy, you're kind of on the same page mentally with that light app that you got in the works and that kind of stuff too. So I tried to find some wireless lights on like Amazon, and they don't work outside for me. So I had to switch to the visual cards. So it seems like we're on the same page as far as that concept, which is pretty cool, because I haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean people aren't doing it. But that's all I got on that.
I really appreciated the parts of the course that engaged your peripheral vision, because it's part of range day shooting targets. You're so focused, so dialed in. It's hard to kind of step back or still keep your head on a swivel, look for other threats or other things that are going on at the same time that you're still focused. Again, engaging the brain, engaging the sight, the grip, getting all your fundamentals down, but don't switch off your brain. You got to keep scanning for those threats that may not be right in front of you. For instance, you might be focused on targets 500 yards away and you miss one that's only 130 yards away.
Ouch.
Too soon. All right. Let's back to Andy's question. Where can we find more out? What's your website and all that good stuff, Brent?
So you can find my instructor stuff on defenders-usa.com. And if you want to take a class with me, you would just go to our calendar, and then you can sort out the classes options through either all of them in date, or you can actually sort them from location, or sort them through, it says speaker on the website, but that instructor. So if you want to take a class with me, you would just click my name. If you wanted to do stuff with Adam, you would find his name. My other business, Haven Defense Co., is havendefenseco.com, and that's the holster work. So if you're interested in some really good holsters, I provide that also for quite a few handgun options. So
yeah, and it looks like you guys have course offerings throughout the United States. Ben Avery Shooting Facility, Montana, Utah, Texas, Colorado, Missouri, Texas, Arizona, nothing in New Mexico. Whatever, that's fine.
Hey, we're up for it. Usually the Colorado ones are going to be me. There is one in Arizona that I'm actually running this class, Decisional Defender, and Adam will be a student. So I'll be running the show while he's a student for me. And that is January, I think the second weekend of January, whatever date that is. So it's already listed on the website. So I'll be in Arizona. That'll be my first traveling instructor job this time around. So, but I'm always open for, instructing and teaching anywhere else if anybody's interested. If I can swing it.
Awesome. Andy, let's kick it back to you for final thoughts.
Just another good show. We appreciate you guys coming on. As I mentioned in the beginning of the show, I can vouch for Brent. Brent's an awesome shooter, great guy. So if you have the opportunity to train with him, I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. And thank you to your family for being so welcoming while we were out there.
Yeah, it was our pleasure.
Yeah, you guys
got to go see some cool stuff. So,
yep, they loved it. It was awesome.
You guys got that good food. Andy always, Andy and his wife always cook up the good food for the classes.
It's a bit spicy for the little one, but that's all right.
That's blasphemy in New Mexico. I doubt that's.
We have to bring him to New Mexico more.
Yeah. Come and go to some of this green chili. Awesome.
Spice them up.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you to our listeners and our viewers. Once again, remember, it's your life, it's your safety and protection. It's your responsibility. Y'all take safe, and we'll see you. Take safe.
Take safe.
Gosh. Y'all take it easy, and we'll see you next week.